All right, good people. Welcome to another exciting week in space. I am your host of the most, Joan Emerson Bell. I am an astrologer, tarot reader, mental health counselor, and I like to show up here every Monday at 11-ish Mountain Time to tell you what's going on for the week in space. Space. Good morning, Gina Maria. Good morning, Vera Long. Nice to see everybody out there. I am just coming off a fun-filled and jam-packed weekend with my family, so I'm a little haggard today, but we're doing the best we can with what we got. And I like to think that I got some interesting stuff to talk about today. We are looking at this week in space for April the 6th, 2026 through April the 12th, 2026. And before I get into the astrology of the week, a couple announcements. I will be co-facilitating an Oracle Dream Retreat in Greece. That's going down May 8th through 15th. This is with the very talented and brilliant dream worker and mythologist Sarah Janes, and we will be going to Delphi and Epidavros, to the Temple of Asclepius, and to the Oracle Temple of Delphi, which is the temple to Apollo, who is the god of the oracular and prophecy, among other things. Um, yeah, and in this retreat, we will be exploring the precognitive power of dreams. I think that there may be one or two spots left. If y'all are interested, you can check out at Sarah Jane's Dreaming on the Instagrams, shoot her a DM, or you can go to themysteries.org to get more information or to sign up today. And yeah. So that's going on, and I'll put links to all of that in the show notes on the YouTube and the podcast. And then there is a link in my bio on Instagram. Also, there is a new Melee report that is out that came out for the Libra full moon last week. It is a little different than the usual format. I got busy, but I was able to put out an episode that is kind of a planetary overview, looking at the planets in Chaldean order, going from the moon up through the sun. It's an hour-long show that I put together as a proposal for NTS radio, which unfortunately didn't get picked up, but you all get to reap the benefits of my work, and it's a pretty awesome playlist and brief overview of some of the planetary archetypes from the moon up through the sun. So that is Planets for the People, Volume 1, which is out now on my SoundCloud, which is Camp Wizard Camp. And there's a link in my bio, which, thanks to Gina Maria, I'm pretty sure works now. Good looking out, homie. Um, yeah, that's in my bio on Instagram. And yeah, I'll be putting out a volume 2 at some point. Good morning, Jesse Brown. Nice to see you, my friend. All right. So that is all the advertisements. And with that, yeah, let's get into this week in space for April the 6th, 2026, up through April the 12th of 2026. Um, so, all right. Woo-saw. All right. First transit we got this week, kicking off on Wednesday, April the 8th. We have Mars in Pisces, sextile Uranus in Taurus. And let me share my screen for the folks at home on the YouTube. Uh, Bam. There we go. So we have Mars right here at 29 degrees, 6 minutes of Pisces. And we have that in an exact sextile to Uranus over here at 29 degrees and 6 minutes of Taurus. So Uranus is seeking to break free from old forms, and to revolutionize everything that it touches. Uranus in this sextile and at this moment is at the very last degrees of the fixed sign of Taurus, where it has been upending values, relationship with resources, and stability over the past 7 years. Uranus will move into Gemini in a few weeks on April the 25th. And now it's kind of having its swan song in the Venus ruled sign of Taurus. And Wednesday, Uranus comes into a sextile with Mars, who's a planet that deals with courage, conflict, and action. And just a heads up, this is a very Mars heavy melee report. So just get ready for that. So Mars makes things happen through force of will, through force of will. Mars is not interested in strategy like his sister Athena. Mars wants to take action and get mixed up in things all the way up to the top. It is direct and impulsive and deals with action and reaction. Mars is appetite and drive, kind of born out of survival needs and the fulfillment of desires. Mars also deals with things like anger and inflammation and things that are hot, sharp, and inflamed. This could be objects, emotions, or conditions. As Mars comes into the sextile with Uranus, it inflames the need for change and a desire to take action to disrupt the status quo and outdated ways of thinking or getting things done. So Uranus in Taurus has kind of functioned like a slow rolling earthquake that has shifted our collective landscape over the past 7 years. There have been shifts in global finance, collective values, class relations, and access to resources. Um, and that's some of the legacy of Uranus's movement through the fixed Earth sign of Taurus has upended kind of traditional notions of what is practical and left us scrambling for stability and comfort. So Mars in this sextile may activate Uranus's need for excitement, novelty, change. We may notice an increased sense of impatience this week, including feelings of frustration with routine or things that we may feel are constricting our sense of freedom. And we may find there is a kind of increased motivation to initiate change in these areas of life where we're feeling stagnant or stale or constrained. So, with Uranus, the rule of thumb is to expect the unexpected, which I don't know, I'm kind of used to by now. With Mars can kind of be a trigger that activates sensitive points in space and planetary energies. And so while this is a supportive aspect to sextile, it's harmonious, it's an aspect that deals with kind of collaboration and communication, we may find that frustrations that have been building up may seek an outlet under this transit. So Uranus can be sudden, unpredictable events, and Mars's influence here may create the conditions for these energies to be released in some way. Pressure that builds up over time needs to find a release so it doesn't turn into an eruption or an explosion. We want to kind of let the pressure off consciously and ideally skillfully. Well, on an individual level, we don't really have much control over larger collective global systems or events, but we do have some, maybe a little control over our own actions and responses. So, something to consider this week is the ways that pressure has built up in our personal lives and finding conscious, healthy ways of letting some of that pressure off so it doesn't create explosions in our individual worlds. And so, what one thing to think about is the ways you can create change on an individual level that may lead to a greater sense of autonomy and freedom in your personal world. What are skillful ways that you can take action to create something innovative and new for yourself? As we do this on an individual level, we may be less impacted by external events that we have no control over. So, this is a good time to seek out novelty and new exciting experiences. Practice shifting your routine this week and trying something new. If you find yourself feeling heated or frustrated, see if you can do something physical to discharge some of that energy. Mars has a lot to do with the body and athletics and physical activity. Or you also might want to see if there are ways that you can channel that energy into some form of productive action that can help you to affect change, that can give you a little bit more breathing room. So, one of the issues with Uranus is that revolutionary energy can become somewhat compulsive when we become hijacked by Uranus, either on an individual level or a collective level. There can be a desire to keep tearing things down that don't live up to the ideal, the picture in our mind. And the desire for change can lose sight of the bigger picture goals. And it can just burn things down without the consideration of what of value might need to be preserved for the long run, or what might need to come afterwards. And this is why we often get the revolution that we get and not the one that we want. And Uranus is connected with the mythological Titan Prometheus. Um, Richard Tarnas wrote an essay about the relationship between Prometheus and Uranus and makes a pretty good case for it. Uranus is best known for, or sorry, Prometheus is best known for stealing fire from the gods to give to humans, and lesser known for creating humanity to begin with. And so when the gods looked out from Mount Olympus and saw little fires dotting the dark landscape and humans gathered around them sharing stories and cooking their meals, the gods realized that they had been had and that sacred fire had been stolen and redistributed. And so Zeus punished Prometheus by chaining him to a rock and having an eagle eat out Prometheus's liver each day. And Prometheus is immortal, so he couldn't die. And so each day this torture would begin again. It's pretty bleak. The Greeks definitely had a flair for the dramatic. So walk with me for a minute. In Eastern medicine, I've heard it said that anger is associated with the liver, and anger, aggravation, and fury are domains that the planet Mars presides over. So, with this sextile, we have this relationship between Mars and Uranus or Prometheus, and the place that holds anger, the liver. That organ, which is in the mythology of Prometheus, being picked out repeatedly by Zeus's eagle, or the anger constantly gnawing at us or digging into us. So, martial emotions like rage, repressed anger, or resentment can be stored in the liver and create imbalances over time. And this can impact liver function, which helps to handle conflict and balance mental emotional states. So, on a current events level, Trump tweeted an unhinged, expletive ridden rant on Easter Sunday, threatening Iran to open the Strait of Hormuz. Bernie Sanders posted in response, quote, 1 month after starting the war in Iran, this is the statement of the President of the United States on Easter Sunday. These are ravings of a dangerous and mentally unbalanced individual. Congress has got to act now, end this war. Thank you, Bernie. And so this is a prime example of anger creating imbalance. Trump, who has Uranus on his north node, acts pretty unpredictably and has a history of creating massive disruptions. He's also becoming more unstable and driven further into madness as he is unable to get his way and his martial ambitions are thwarted, which creates frustration and not being able to overpower his adversaries, and as Bernie stated, making him more unbalanced and mentally unstable. And so we see this sort of like activation of anger, create like picking at somebody and creating an imbalance. And this is a global imbalance as well as an internal imbalance, which seems to be exasperating his mentally ill state. So, on a mythological level, Prometheus's punishment represents the kind of tearing apart of the conscious and unconscious parts of the personality. This process is necessary for a deeper understanding of the self, but it is brought about through imbalance, which needs to experience separation and dismemberment in order to find wholeness and reunification. And again, this may be happening at a global and archetypal level. So Mars is separating and it seeks individuality. Uranus is seeking authenticity. And when these two come together in a supportive aspect like a sextile, they are looking to create space to step into the most authentic sense of oneself. And anger is a great way to create separation, to cut the tethers of the past and to carve a path forward. But unprocessed and unconscious anger can also separate us from ourselves. The relationship between the liver and Prometheus can speak to unconscious anger that needs to be addressed in order to be integrated and allow the return to wholeness. Until the fiery, martial feelings of anger and resentment are made conscious, they will continue to pick at the psyche, creating a continual sense of separation that is seeking to be rebalanced through awareness and the conscious discharge of these martial feelings to create a greater synthesis of our conscious and unconscious parts of ourselves. Which moves us along to Thursday, April the 9th, when we have Mercury leaving their retrograde shadow as they cross the 22-degree, 33-minute mark of Pisces. So let me pull this up in the chart. So what we have here on the chart is Mercury's retrograde station, which occurred back on February 25th, 2026, when they reached that 22-degree and 33-minute mark in Pisces, and they stood still and began moving backwards. And now let's switch this to our current transits. So, yeah, and we'll move this forward a couple days to Thursday. And so now we have Mercury crossing that 22-degree and 33 arc minute place in the zodiac, meaning that they have left their retrograde shadow. And so again, Mercury stationed retrograde on February the 25th or 26th at 22 degrees and 33 arc minutes of Pisces. Then they stationed direct on March 20th at 8 degrees, 29 minutes of Pisces. And on Thursday, they are returning to that 22nd degree of Pisces, which means they are now leaving that retrograde shadow. And they are now moving into new territory for the first time since the end of February. So Mercury is a god of the crossroads. Their rulership over crossroads deals with Mercury's cognitive abilities to kind of sort through information and to put the pieces together in order to make informed decisions about which path to take when we arrive at this crossroads or any crossroads. Another component of Mercury's relationship with this liminal space is that people used to meet and engage in exchange at intersections and crossroads in the ancient world. Mercury deals with exchange and commerce. This is the exchange of information, the exchange of goods for services or currency, and the sharing of information and ideas, and the transmission of news. And the for all of that, the crossroads was the place to be. It was a place where travelers would meet and engage in these forms of exchange. And as Mercury moves out of their shadow phase, they arrive at this intersection of past and future. Down one of these roads lies the rethinking, reconsidering, reimagining, and revising that Mercury was involved in during their retrograde through Pisces. Because Pisces is a water sign, all of this work probably had some form of emotional component to it. As Mercury leaves their shadow phase and they begin to move forward and to cover new territory in the zodiac, a new road opens up, one that leads to the future and the unknown. Mercury has not yet gotten to experience the last 8 degrees or so in Pisces. This new territory, what lays beyond, is unimagined and unfamiliar. The question here is, how do we take what we have learned during Mercury's retrograde review and apply it to the choices that we make now and the path that we choose moving forward? So Mercury first entered their pre-retrograde shadow on February the 11th when they crossed the 8-degree mark of Pisces. And since then, Mercury has been moving back and forth through the first and second decan of Pisces. They have learned to gather and process information from the greater emotional body of the collective and tapping into the wisdom that exists beyond the individual self. Mercury in Pisces is down with going deep, and there is a willingness to explore the expansive nature of consciousness and the web of emotional connections that we form through our interactions with life. The exchange that we engage in here creates cords and threads that hold us in this web of life. Mercury's retrograde through Pisces may have been a review of some of these cords to some extent, and a reconsideration of which ones are worth keeping and which ones may require some adjusting. And so now that we arrive at this crossroads, we can consider the ways that we want to move forward, and hopefully with a bit more clarity, and thinking about which chords might need to be renegotiated, which chords might want to be strengthened as we move forward. Okay. Also, Thursday, April the 9th, we have Mars entering Aries. And this is a big one. This is a big one, and I'll tell you why. Let me just pull this up on the chart. So I'm going to move this forward just a couple of hours. So we have Mars. Uh, yeah, so we have Mars here at 0 degrees of Aries, and I just want to pull up, let me see. Uh, yeah, I just want to pull this up so we can see this as reference. And I will explain this to everybody who cannot see this. So in the inner chart, we have the transits for Thursday, April the 9th, where we have Mars entering into Aries. In the outer chart, we have the chart for the Saturn-Neptune conjunction, which occurred on February the 20th. And as Mars enters into their home sign of Aries, they are activating that Saturn-Neptune conjunction, which has already been pretty active, for most of this year. And now Mars may trigger some of the themes, but let's get into it. So as Mars enters into their diurnal home in Aries, a few things happen. First, Mars comes home, moving out of the kind of undifferentiated waters of Pisces and into a sign and a decan which they rule. So Aries is a sign that deals with individual drive to take action and the struggle to claim one's place in the world. Here, Mars runs on will and seeks to battle obstacles to sharpen the individual sense of self and to develop a sense of independence and autonomy. The other thing that happens as Mars moves over the threshold into Aries is they activate the 0 degree point in Aries. And this is the equinox point, which signals the movement from the night world of the unconscious, the intuitive, the unseen, and the collective into the day world of consciousness, the rational, the visible, and the individual. They also activate the Saturn-Neptune conjunction, which occurred at 0 degrees and 45 arc minutes of Aries on February the 20th of this year. Mars is a trigger, and it activates the points in space and the planets that it interacts with. And Mars will hit the degree and minute of the Saturn-Neptune conjunction on Friday, April the 10th, 0 degrees, 45 arc minutes. So even though this conjunction occurred over a month ago, that point in space is still charged. And Mars' movement over 0 degrees Aries may revive and ignite some of the latent themes of the Saturn-Neptune conjunction. So Mars will perfect their conjunction with Neptune on Sunday, and go on to conjunct Saturn the following Sunday, April the 19th at 7 degrees of Aries. And so as Mars meets Neptune and then Saturn, it will further activate the energies of February's conjunction and re-emphasize themes of dissolving structures, increasing international tensions, shifting of geopolitical power balances, and renegotiation of boundaries and borders. So, one of the themes that is encoded with Neptune and Aries, which has been brought to the forefront with Neptune's conjunction with Saturn, and I think will be punctuated by Mars's meeting with Neptune, is the idea of holy war. Neptune is a planet that is associated with belief, and this is a belief that becomes consuming. It is ecstatic experience which sweeps people up in a frenzy and causes individuals to lose themselves or to seek redemption through the power of the collective identity or shared belief. So, with Neptune and Aries and with its relationship to Saturn, some of the ways this belief is taking form is through nationalism, conflict, and war. At a structural level in the US government, the Neptunian desire for assimilation and redemption is playing out in the form of a death cult. In my opinion, America has been a death cult for a really long time, maybe since its beginning, maybe since its origin. But in recent history, the kind of cutting of social services, the denial of science, the militarization of police forces, the encouragement of genocide, the rampant destruction of the environment, the purging of immigrants and people of color, and exorbitant military spending shows a denial of life and the embrace of destruction and death. To further emphasize this, Trump recently made a statement that the US could not pay for Medicaid, Medicare, or childcare because they needed all that money for war. This is kind of confirmation of the death cult ideal, the rejection of services and supports that help to promote life, and the denial of resources that help to create better living conditions for the population in favor of directing those resources into war and destruction. This administration is making a conscious choice to honor and feed death instead of life. So one of the archetypes that Neptune and Aries and the Saturn Neptune conjunction has revealed is the this form of the death cult and is playing out with people like Pete Hegseth and Donald Trump, who are very vocally trying to frame the invasion, the illegal war with Iran, as a holy war, which is intended to bring about Armageddon and the rapture. Hegseth has several tattoos that make reference to the Crusades, and he wrote a book, which I haven't read, titled American Crusader. Um, Crusades and religious wars are one of the themes of Neptune and Aries. Neptune is a planet of belief and religious extremism, and Aries is ruled by Mars. Mars will conjoin Neptune on Sunday, which will activate some of these themes. And we'll talk about that in a minute through a somewhat different lens. But the archetype of a crusader seems like it fits in with the theme of Neptune and Aries. And it seems like Hegseth has been hijacked by the Neptunian archetype. He's an alcoholic, which is a Neptunian signature, and his zealotry is seeking to initiate a holy war with the delusional goal of creating the end of days, which I personally think is a terrible idea. So recently, there were hundreds of complaints about an email that was sent to officers in the US military with some heavy-handed references to the apocalypse as a way of bringing about the second coming. According to the website military.com, a complaint shared by an anonymous non-commissioned officer to the Military Religious Freedom Foundation, MRFF, claimed that non-commissioned officers were told that the Iran war is part of God's plan and that President Donald Trump was anointed by Jesus to light the signal fires in Iran to cause Armageddon and mark his, I'm assuming Jesus's, return to Earth. I talked about this a few weeks ago, how the myth of apocalypse is a pretty bad myth. Traditionally, cultures have cyclical cosmologies, which is in line with how everything in nature functions. The apocalypse myth only really appears with the New Testament in the book of Revelations and moves from a kind of cyclical understanding of life, death, and rebirth into a linear trajectory which has a definitive end in the apocalypse. So with Neptune and Aries, we get religious fanatics, and their fanatical doctrine is bent by the belief in end times and Armageddon. This myth has been used historically as an instrument of control to hold power over people, as the threat of retribution and punishment to keep people in line, as well as a goal with which to direct the collective psyche. The religious fanatics that are running the government and the military have mobilized this myth, which is sweeping the collective like a wave. And even if it isn't believed on an individual level, zealots like Hegseth are unleashing this myth on the world like a flood. Uh, so Arwa Madawi wrote an article in The Guardian on March 28th titled Pete Hegseth is imbuing violence with a religious righteousness. Arwa writes that the Trump administration has framed the war on Iran as a fight against dangerous extremists who want to bring about the end times. We're fighting we're fighting religious fanatics who seek a nuclear capability in order for some religious Armageddon. Hegseth said of Iranian leaders during a CBS interview, for example. But the religious fanatics are hardly just in Iran, are they? Increasingly, they are at the highest levels of the US government. Hegseth is affiliated with the Congregation of Reformed and Evangelical Churches, founded by Doug Wilson, who self-identifies as a Christian nationalist. He reposted videos of Wilson saying he'd like to see the U.S. become a Christian nation, and has endorsed the theocratic and authoritarian doctrine of sphere sovereignty, which is derived from the extremist beliefs of Christian Reconstructionalism. These beliefs seem to be seeping into foreign policy. Earlier this month, it was reported that U.S. military commanders have been invoking rhetoric about biblical end times to justify involvement in the Iran war to troops. So, religious fanatics on kind of all sides of global conflicts are manufacturing this death cult ideal, which is focused on destruction in order to bring about some fairy tale culmination that is pulling the entire world into this doomsday fantasy. This is the dark side of Neptune and Aries. Delusional beliefs that become destructive and the worship of death in order to overcome one's fear and perceived sense of isolation and inadequacy. In another opinion piece in The Guardian from March 23rd, titled Pete Hegseth is Promoting a Nihilist Cult of Death, Jan Werner Mueller writes, unlike with fascism in the 20th century, there is no attempt to promote or symbolically reward self-sacrifice. It is just video game style killing at a distance, justified not with strategic objectives, but with seemingly uncontrollable emotions, fury, and a thirst for vengeance. And all accompanied by open admissions that basic laws of warfare will be broken. Pete Hegseth has started holding monthly Pentagon prayer circles. During the most recent one on March 25th, he called for overwhelming violence of action against those who deserve no mercy. So Mueller goes on to say, actual soldiers with long-standing codes of honor, as opposed to the fantasy world Hegseth is creating with his cliche-ridden chatter on TV, would not punch enemies when they are down. And so Mars is a warrior god, among other things. Traditionally, the warring energy that Mars brings was confined by rituals, rites, and temples that were constructed around this bloodthirsty god to prevent it from spilling out into all aspects of life. In Greece, Mars was known as Ares, who was the chaos of battle and the energy of combat. This was oftentimes looked down on by the other Olympians because unbridled killing wasn't something that was really desired. So Aries was said to be Zeus's least favorite child. He much preferred his daughter Athena, who represented strategy and wisdom. However, all of the gods recognized the function and necessity of Ares' role in the pantheon. The Greeks understood that this was an archetypal energy that was intrinsic to life and to human nature. And they recognized that the energetic force of Ares needed proper containment. Without structure, the chaotic energy of Aries can run amok, feeding on the chaos that it brings, and it can get out of hand and infect individuals and entire societies. In Greece, there were temples to Ares, offerings, prayers, ritual purification, rites for returning soldiers to perform in order to re enter society in healthy ways. And many of these traditions have been lost or have evolved since then. Archetypal psychologist James Hillman, who I love, wrote an essay called Wars, Arms, Rams, Mars, which is an excellent essay on the topic of arms control and has a brilliant title. And he talks about how the pageantry of the military, the marching, the drilling, the uniforms, the ranks, the insignias create a sort of temple that help to constrain the destructive energies of Mars. Without these formulas, Mars or Ares lacks containment and can become uncontrollable. And so I think about the film Apocalypse Now, which is Francis Ford Coppola's epic film about Vietnam based on Joseph Conrad's story, Heart of Darkness, which is a tale about colonization in Africa. In Apocalypse Now, there are several depictions of the martial archetype. The one that stands out to me is the ones that stand out to me are Robert Duvall's character, Lieutenant Colonel Bill Kilgore, who is the air cavalry commander that escorts Martin Sheen and his crew down the Nung River. Kilgore says the iconic line, I love the smell of napalm in the morning, and is so committed to surfing that he makes it part of his mission to find epic surf breaks for his soldiers. Kilgore is kind of a lunatic who's kind of trying to create a feeling of home for his men with surfing and post-battle beach parties. But his character is bound by ideas of rank and tradition. He wears the insignias and ribbons of the U.S. cavalry and plays Wagner's Flight of the Valkyries during a helicopter raid. I'm not trying to glorify this character to say that he is better than worse than anyone else in this film. He's just a different depiction of the martial archetype. And this is a movie about the chaos of Vietnam, and everyone in it is problematic, or they are normal people responding to really problematic conditions and oftentimes making them worse. But Lieutenant Kilgore is an example of Mars that is functioning within the constraints of a structure which channels its energy and prevents rampant, unchecked destruction. Another depiction of Mars in Apocalypse Now is Colonel Kurtz, played by Marlon Brando, who becomes over-identified with the martial archetype and begins killing indiscriminately. Kurtz is unconstrained Mars, without the temples and rituals that held the god of war in check. And so Colonel Kurtz starts his own death cult deep in the jungle. Him and his followers kill indiscriminately, indulging in human and animal sacrifices and leaving a trail of destruction everywhere they go. Returning to Arwa Madawi, excuse me, they write in their article or their opinion piece that Pete Hegseth is imbuing violence with a religious righteousness. That Hegseth doesn't just have a dangerous disregard for rules of engagement, which he's called stupid, he's brought a disturbing level of bloodlust to his so-called Department of War. The pundit turned politician seems to take great delight in violence, imbuing it with a religious righteousness. So these are depictions of Mars unchecked, a Mars who has escaped his temple to revel in destruction, cloaked in religious rhetoric to legitimize the thirst for blood. This is Colonel Kurtz in a suit and a tie, who terrorizes communities not with a blade or a gun, but with a phone call, a text, the move of a joystick, and the push of a button. Human sacrifice to feed a vengeful god in the guise of video game animation and sanitized action movie aesthetics. Janessa Goldbeck, chief executor of Vet Voice Foundation, a nonprofit advocacy organization, said, Pete Hegseth is a very dangerous person. He's a white Christian nationalist and has the arsenal of the United States government at his disposal, and a permission slip from President Trump to deploy carnage wherever he wishes, against whomever he wishes. This is also an archetype of Saturn and Neptune and Mars in the Mars ruled sign of Aries. Saturn, who rules limits and restrictions, who operates with caution and considers the long-term implications of one's actions, is in their fall in Aries. And we can see this play out in the initiation of the war with Iran, which was pretty poorly thought out, in my opinion. It has no exit strategy, has no clear goals. This is Saturn in fall in Aries. Oh, we're just jumping in and now we're going to figure it out. And whoops, I didn't have time to think it through. And Neptune, um, as Saturn met Neptune, limitations, structures, and boundaries have been dissolving and being washed away. And the structures that govern and constrain the god of war have dissolved. It leaves only the delusional beliefs and religious extremism of Neptune to direct Mars's destructive actions. Simon Tisdale wrote an opinion piece in The Guardian titled, As Team Trump Wages Unceasing War on Iran, and evangelical nationalists are destroying any moral world order we once had. Pretty epic title there. Simon writes, Despite Trump's apocalyptic rhetoric and sensational online talk about end times and Armageddon, this immensely damaging, unjustified, and shaming war may be forcing Americans to reassess their moral relationship with the world. Is Trump solely to blame? Wondered the U.S. columnist Lydia Paul Green. Or is he the fulfillment of what America has always been? A self-satisfied nation, granted license by its myths about providence and exceptionalism to do whatever it wants. Trump's presidency, she argued, has revealed a much older malady, America's unshakable faith in its ability to shape the world to its liking, indifferent to what others might want, and supremely confident that its plan is the right one. Beyond Trump, it's this disfiguring mentality we Americans must face. So what we are experiencing now may be a reality check on the myth of entitlement, American exceptionalism, self-righteousness, and the old story that might makes right, which is a Saturn and Aries story. This is another component of the Saturn-Neptune conjunction, a reality check where the Neptunian fantasy is confronted and reformed and reshaped by Saturnian reality. But the only way to know how this will actually unfold is to stick around and find out. And I have one more transit to talk about, the going on Sunday, April the 12th, when we have Mars in Aries conjunct Neptune in Aries at 2 degrees and 39 arc minutes. But unfortunately, I have a plane to catch. So I think I'm gonna leave it off right here, and I will post that next part tomorrow. So stay tuned, my friends. Thank you so much for tuning in. I hope that everyone out there has a great and safe week in space. And yeah, I will sometime Tuesday morning find time to jump back on the internets to finish what's going on this week in space. And we'll be talking about Mars in Aries conjunct Neptune in Aries through the lens of Herman Melville's literary classic Moby Dick. So stay tuned for that. What up, Serban? I'm glad that you caught this. I hope you liked my part about Apocalypse Now. All right. Yeah. Be well, my friends. And until next time, be good to yourselves, be good to each other, and as always, may the force be with you. Bye now.